So try to sit, excuse me, sit comfortably. Compose your mind, relax your body, relax your mind. And as we usually do, put your attention on the respiration first of all. And your mind begins to calm down. Bring your attention to your mental consciousness. Even the mental image of your mind, and right now is a thought within an image within your space-like mind. So even let go of that. Let go again and again and try to simulate a perception of the nature of the mind, not just an imagination of it. Successively let go of the fish-like thoughts in the ocean of your mind, cloud-like thoughts in the space of your mind. The seeming solidity of the body is arising to your mental consciousness as just a thought, as an appearance. Let go of that also and try to turn your attention to the consciousness that's perceiving it. And the sense of the I also, the ego. Perhaps you notice a sense of duality between what appears to be the observer, the experiencer of this spaciousness of the mind, knowing it, and the mind is something distant and cut off from that, dualistically. That sense of a findable self is also an appearance to your mind. The object of our self-grasping ignorance is a sense of I. See if you can now notice its very subtle appearance in your mind, not related with your body, not related with your mind, not identified with them, just existing from its own side. That which might be afraid or annoyed or pleased. See if you can notice the way that it seems to be appearing, what its seeming attributes are. Self-sufficient observer. One which is not just labeled from the outside, not just a merely imputed I, but something much different. Its sense of reality or concreteness. Seemingly findable somewhere within the aggregates of our body and mind. See if you can notice how the mind also reacts to that appearance. Without your intervention, without wisdom dawning, we acquiesce to that. We go along with that. We assent to it, we grasp to it as though it were really true. There really is an I who is worried or doubtful or excited or angered. Without necessarily using a logical argument, a logical sign, other than the fact that the Buddha himself said that this I does not exist that way, that the self that does exist, the conventional self, is merely a label we give to this body and mind. See if you can let go of that apprehension to the I. Let it dissolve into spaciousness that you recognize as the non-existence of that findable, self-sufficient, inherently existent I. Recognizing that all living beings that are still caught in cyclic existence, not yet liberated, are held by this ignorance, under the control of this demonic force. Even the arhats who've escaped from samsara, the Hinayana arhats, still are under the influence of the remnant of that self-cherishing thought. Are two real enemies. Are two allies in this, method and wisdom, that are the antidotes to self-cherishing thought and self-grasping. For this time, right now, we have a life of leisure and endowment that is not easy to find, very, very rare, with which we can actually develop these two antidotes to the self-cherishing and self-grasping. Bodhicitta, conventional bodhicitta, ultimate bodhicitta. we don't put much time into that endeavor, even when we do have the space to do it. And what time we do have to live is constantly decreasing. Every day, the number of weeks left to live are decreased. Break into another week, like opening up another package of soup in your pantry full of soup. With every week, the number of months we have left to live are decreasing. With every month that starts, another year that's been broken into and is slowly finishing. Like that, the decades pass and our life quickly finishes. At the end of this life, we're going to have to experience either an upper rebirth in the higher realms or in the lower realms. And if we check our minds, probably more likely that we're not creating very, very strong karmic causes to be born, definitely in the upper realms. So with that as an initial motivation, initial concern or qualm, fear, and the fear of even being born in cyclic existence again, getting caught up into it, where there's no real pleasure to be found. The fear of not being able to lead others out of that suffering by ourselves alone. Thinking of the teachings of the Dharma, Buddhist actual realizations, as the actual refuge from those fears. The Buddha who taught them, the omniscient mind, exemplified by our teachers, our gurus. The Arya Sangha, those who've put those teachings into practice perfectly. And the representations of those, conventional Sangha. I think in particular, within the state of refuge for the welfare of all sentient beings, I'm going to listen to the teachings tonight, participate in the class, contribute, for the sake of all living beings, for my own self to get closer to the state of enlightenment so that I'll be less harmful and eventually have a positive impact upon all beings, for their welfare, not just for my own sake. I'm going to listen to the teachings in order to become enlightened for the welfare of all living beings. And then relax. Bring your attention back. Wants to wake me up. Thanks, Georgie. I needed that. So, how's everyone? Good. Any questions hopefully from your study or your attempt at putting some of this into practice? Any observations? No takers? Oh, yeah, good. Sister Thea.
Regarding Yamantaka, and what I'm wondering is that maybe it would be useful to request Yamantaka initiation in view of the fact that you're going to be offering for the courses that have a prerequisite of highest yoga tantra.
Not soon, but anyway, we're not.
Well, next year.
Maybe next year. I don't know. Maybe the year after that. Yeah. Yeah.
And I have heard that Lama Zopa's teacher may be coming in August and would be qualified to give such an initiation.
Yeah. Yeah. It's always the temptation of wanting to have tantric initiations and tantric teachings is a very valid one, very great one. And so when the situation arises, I think when these great teachers come and we've been given some advice by our teachers to take that, that's a good time. Yeah. So maybe when who knows, maybe this summer when Kirti Senchab Rinpoche is here, I understand he may be coming, and so it could be. It would be a good time. Mr. Georgie, you can leave the camera like that. Okay. Poor Thea will be. Okay, not that I want to be the center of attention, but I thought the whole class will go on and the camera will be on Thea the whole time. She might feel a little bit. She'll feel a little bit awkward. No, you had a question, I think.
Well, I guess it was more of a comment. I was going to say I'm getting anxious to get to the end because I'm learning about all of the reasons why my karma is coming back and experiencing this and that negative thing. And I'm ready to get to the point where I find out what to do about it.
Okay, that's a good point. So actually we get to that today, as a matter of fact.
Excellent.
Around which, good timing, huh? So I think it's interesting, the strategy for dealing with the emotions, dealing with the destructive emotions, is one in which you first have to identify what they are. So you don't mistake thinking that something is a destructive emotion when it's not. Or you might misidentify and think that your destructive emotions are fine. It's okay to be angry, no problem. They need it. And I sometimes you hear that politicians and some other people, sometimes they're even praised because they got angry, The first step, I think, is we have to identify it. That's kind of, in a sense, a little bit related to the point that we were talking about at the beginning of the course about identifying the vital point. Remember, there was some discussion about that. You had to really know what you're talking about in order to attack it, right? You have to know where it is, and that has to do with recognizing the object of negation also. Then the second part after that, after you identify things, is to understand their shortcomings, their faults. And so that's many verses. We've been talking about the faults of the afflictions in the sense that they are like a wheel of sharp weapons that comes back to us, right, and brings hardship upon us, causes problems for others. And implied in there also were, there was always some resolution. From now on, I will not do this, I will do this, and so forth. The actual antidote, though, the third step, after you recognize, let's say, talk about anger, so you recognize what anger actually is, or ego grasping, and you see over a long period of time in your own experience its defects, how it really is the cause of all of our suffering. It doesn't really bring any pleasant response to you. Then you can develop the aspiration, the determination to apply the antidote. And the antidote would be, in these cases, there'd be two different antidotes. The antidote to the self-grasping would be what? Praying to Yamantaka? Part of it? What would be the actual antidote to the ignorance that's grasping to the self? Yeah, actually developing the wisdom. That means contemplating emptiness maybe encompasses that, but almost sometimes we say, I've mentioned this before, sometimes people think emptiness is something sacred. Right? My teacher Lama Yeshe said, emptiness is not sacred.
No,
It
opens up the door for like anything.
Emptiness is not sacred, he said. Even excrement, everything has a nature of emptiness. It's not something rare. What's rare and sacred is the wisdom that realizes emptiness. So it's not that emptiness is the antidote. It's the understanding of emptiness, the wisdom of emptiness, right? So I think even linguistically, reminding ourselves of that, what we have to try to do is develop the subjective understanding. Just having an empty mind, which we think of as emptiness, won't necessarily become an antidote to self-grasping. Although it seems sometimes people, I'm meditating on emptiness, just having an empty mind. So you have to have, do you follow what I'm, yeah, some people think like that. So the actual antidote of self-grasping, that ignorance, which is the root of all of the other delusions, is the wisdom that perceives the emptiness of the self and then eventually the emptiness of all phenomena. What's the antidote of the self-cherishing thought?
Well, saying that it doesn't have an inherent existence, and then developing the bodhisattvas and wanting to benefit others.
Something like that. Yeah. Who can, Mr. Georgie?
Would it be the direct realization of bodhicitta or the spontaneous realization of bodhicitta?
The direct realization of bodhicitta. That's an interesting turn of phrase. Direct realization of bodhicitta, as opposed to what?
As opposed to conceptual...
Conceptual realization of bodhicitta. There's something to think about. Is
it bodhicitta, isn't that conceptual? Like not ultimate bodhicitta, but the bodhicitta of loving kindness and benefiting all beings. Isn't that conceptual?
Is it? Is bodhicitta conceptual mind or a perceptual mind?
You're mixing things here.
Well,
Now, his is...
maybe I said that wrong.
No, it's good that you said that because it brings up a qualm. Is bodhicitta a conceptual mind or because those of you who are studying low rig also, is it a conceptual mind or direct perception? First of all, where do you have bodhicitta? Is it in your eye consciousness, your nose consciousness? Which consciousness? Bodhicitta is a mind, right?
Yeah.
Bodhicitta, the mind of enlightenment. Jangshub Kisem, Jangshub Sam. Which mind is that has that? Your touch consciousness?
It's mental.
It's mental consciousness, right? It has to be a mental consciousness. And in our continua, our mental continua now, do we have any kinds of direct realizations? Do we have any direct perceptions in our mental consciousness now that are existing over any length of time? I mean, we have thought instance of, supposedly, of direct perception through our eye consciousness and ear consciousness, remember? Those of you that are studying low rig. But do we have any kind of mental direct perceptions now?
Correct? Or just valid?
Even incorrect.
Well, the conception of I. Like
That's not, I said direct perception. Conception of I, first of all, is not, well, as you said, correct, right? The conception of I is a conception, so that's not a direct perception. That's a conceptual thought.
Can you directly perceive something that's valid conventionally and yet not
Can you,
true?
well, let's put it this way, but put it in other words. Can you have a direct perception of something that doesn't exist? Those of you who are studying low rig know the answer to that. What's that called?
Myself?
It's called the facsimile of a direct perception, remember? The the clear appearance of a non-existence, of a non-existent to your mind. So right now we probably don't have any perceptual direct perceptions, mental direct perceptions. That's something that you could have clairvoyance, maybe some kind of dream consciousnesses in some cases, but that's not definitely clear. But clairvoyance, some other things like that might be mental direct perceptions. But those aren't bodhicitta. Bodhicitta is defined in the Prajnaparamita teachings. And when we study it in the monasteries, it's something like this: is a special a special primary mental consciousness. Bodhicitta is not a mental factor. Do you know the difference between a primary mind and mental factor? Elaine, do you know? Primary mind is that which knows the mere entity of an object. Just the quality of knowing of the consciousness, you might say, that knows the general perceptual field. Mental factors are those factors that are still part of the mind, part of the consciousness, that know individual aspects, like wisdom or feeling, anger, attachment, love. All of those things are mental factors. The bodhicitta is a special primary mental consciousness that is preceded by, it always has a causal motivation of aspiring for the welfare of sentient beings, out of, as I say, compassion for sentient beings. And it is accompanied by the aspiration for enlightenment. There's a famous verse in the Abhisamaya Alamkara that Maitreya wrote to explain about the Prajnaparamita, that everyone memorizes when all the monks and nuns memorize when they're studying that. And it says, Semke Pani Shendon Chir Yangdak Zukbe Jangchub De. I mean, Semke Pani. Semke is the sort of technical term for bodhicitta. It means mind generation. Literally, generating the mind which is aspiring for enlightenment, you might say. You might take the etymology that way. Mind generation is Semke Pani Shendon Chir, for the welfare of others, Yangdak Zukbe Jangchub De, to aspire or desire highest complete enlightenment. So there's a lot of debate about that definition. Then sometimes people think, well, it sounds like bodhicitta is a desire, which is a mental factor. But it's not. The definition of bodhicitta is that it's a primary mind, but it's accompanied by two conceptual minds. So even though it's a primary consciousness, those of you who've studied low rig a little more, it might be more easy for you to understand, maybe not. I don't know. Say a primary consciousness is going to take on the same quality as the general tenor of the consciousness that it's the primary consciousness of. If there are mental factors that are conceptual, then that primary consciousness is a conceptual mind. So this bodhicitta would have to be kind of a conceptual mind. So it's not going to be present. It's not going to be manifest anyway when you're in direct realization of emptiness. Bodhicitta is not going to be manifest in your consciousness. Beth? Yeah.
So, are you saying that like most of us humans haven't actually ever experienced bodhicitta? We actually really don't know what it is yet?
I don't know how you got that feeling. And probably, I don't know how you got that, came to that conclusion for what I said, but maybe that's true. Probably, bodhicitta is a very, very special kind of mind which is not easy to generate. From a Buddhist perspective, even a Christian saint who is a great being and has great compassion for people might not have bodhicitta. Because bodhicitta is aspiring for enlightenment with some understanding of that. In some spiritual traditions is considered blasphemous or heretical to think that you could become God or you could become omniscient, right? Do you know that? So from a Buddhist perspective, a mind that has a particular doctrinal understanding of what the human potential is, they might not, at that moment, they might not be able to really generate real bodhicitta. Doesn't mean they wouldn't generate incredibly great qualities. In fact, they might have great compassion and great love that we might not even have, even though we think we understand bodhicitta. Oma, did you have some thought?
I think instead of, I think we have to hear about bodhicitta, and then I think in my own case, I've been able to see acts of kindness, or that seem to be so giving and things like this, that it kind of reinforces that, and I'm not so sure if that seems to me like that would be a perception.
You perceive things. You can perceive things, but then you conceptualize about them. But that's not bodhicitta.
No,
Bodhicitta.
but you're seeing it first, and then I think it reinforces the idea of it to perceive it when other people are doing it. Then
Those
you
are-
know, okay, this kind of actually can exist.
There are different ways that you can have. You can be inspired
Okay.
to generate bodhicitta, and there are various ways that you can have perceptions with your consciousness or your ears or other things that can reinforce your understanding of the shortcomings of self-cherishing, the benefits of cherishing others. But the actual mind of enlightenment is a primary mental consciousness. So it's part of your mental continuum that is dependent upon having previously generated compassion, wishing others to be free of suffering, and on the basis of investigating what's the best way to bring about the alleviation of their suffering, desiring enlightenment, recognizing even if I was a 10th level bodhisattva, I couldn't really help all sentient beings. The only way I could really help them ultimately is to attain enlightenment. So when that thought rises, wow, I got to attain enlightenment. That's the only choice. At that point, a person might have, a simulated bodhicitta. You could call that bodhicitta that's developed through effort. That's what we try to do in our motivation. When we do, say if you do a retreat, you want to try it at the beginning of the retreat to spend a long time trying to motivate with a bodhicitta motivation to try to get that thought. I must attain enlightenment because I have to benefit sentient beings. So it's based on an understanding of renunciation. You can't really develop bodhicitta until you have a sense of renunciation, because you can't really see the entirety of sentient beings suffering. You can't really have great compassion for sentient beings. So maybe we don't, we might call ourselves Mahayanas, but whether we've actually developed bodhicitta it's difficult to say. Probably if we had developed bodhicitta, spontaneous bodhicitta, we would be a bodhisattva. We would have entered the path of accumulation, and we would know it. It's not as though, have I developed bodhicitta? I'm not sure. I don't think so. It's like someone saying, have I realized emptiness? Did I just realize emptiness? I don't think that would constitute an actual, certainly not a direct realization of emptiness. Maybe you can have some insight beyond correct belief, some kind of, some kind of conceptual understanding of emptiness. But when you actually realize emptiness directly, when you actually have a direct experience of it, there's no doubt about it. So that we wouldn't say generally to have a direct realization of bodhicitta. The way you would say it there is, once you develop spontaneous bodhicitta. So spontaneous bodhicitta is kind of like the threshold here that might be analogous to having direct realization of emptiness. So spontaneous bodhicitta would be when you didn't have to think about it any longer. Let's see. I've got to save Dorji. He's been my mother numberless times, even though,
So annoying.
even though whatever obstacle the mind puts up, he's been my mother, my brother, my friend numberless lifetimes. He, like myself, wants to be free of suffering, wants to have happiness. And by even ignoring one sentient being in the field of our view of wishing them to be free of suffering, we don't have actual bodhicitta. Even you leave one person out of your, may all sentient beings attain. I'm going to attain enlightenment to lead all sentient beings to enlightenment, except George Bush. Yeah, you had the same, okay. Or Saddam Hussein, or whatever, George the monk, or whatever. That wouldn't be actual bodhicitta. So it has to be something that is authentic. When that mind rises spontaneously because of familiarization, because of accumulation of merit over a long period of time, then a person would have spontaneous bodhicitta. They would be a bodhisattva. They would enter the Mahayana path. They'd be a Mahayanist, in fact, not just in tenet. They'd be a Mahayanist by practice. They'd be on the first path, the path of accumulation. Okay.
Venerable George, this might be not an important question, so feel free to say it's not. But you said accompanied by the wish for enlightenment. So that implies actually some idea that such a thing is possible. But what if there's a being who, like you said, maybe a Christian, and so for them that's a heretical belief, but they do aspire to do everything they can for the benefit and welfare of all beings.
Right.
And that means...
So what would that be? What would that be? That would be what we call great compassion. So that would be one of the causes of bodhicitta. So we shouldn't think, when we understand the Buddhist position this way, that, oh yeah, we're superior to the Christians, the Muslims, the Jews, or whatever. Because we don't even yet have great compassion in our continuum, let alone using it as a cause to develop bodhicitta. So there are many Christians and others that have great love, great compassion, credible tolerance, but from a Buddhist perspective, that particular state of mind yet will not become a cause of enlightenment because it's not aiming for enlightenment. Okay? It doesn't mean that it doesn't have great results. It doesn't mean that in the subsequent life, that person having mind being cultivated in the omniscient mind, knowing that the Buddha's arranged to appear before that person and lead them into the path when their minds are cultivated. It doesn't preclude that. But at that point, they wouldn't have bodhicitta. Right now, just having in our own mind stream developing great compassion is not developing bodhicitta. There's a difference. Great compassion is one of the causes of bodhicitta, but it is not bodhicitta itself. Mr. Durji.
In terms of eliminating self-cherishing, couldn't someone in a Christian or a Jewish tradition who has that great compassion still destroy the self-cherishing thought, even with just great compassion, even without having the aspiration for full enlightenment in those?
Yeah, there's a certain kind of self-cherishing, but say, for instance, even the Hinayana Arhats also recognize the defects of the ego, but they're aiming for a particular kind of goal. First of all, it's not encompassed in general by an understanding of emptiness from a Buddhist perspective. So they're thinking of a truly existent goal, to be together with God in heaven, or to be reborn when the Messiah comes, or some particular goal. Or perhaps maybe they have no particular, maybe they have a non-theistic, a non-conceptual kind of understanding. But all of these different doctrinal positions, philosophical tenets of different religions, from a Buddhist perspective, unless you had the particular state of mind that was aiming for enlightenment, for the welfare of others, it would not become a cause of enlightenment. In fact, even just aiming for enlightenment for your own benefit doesn't become a direct cause of enlightenment. That's not bodhicitta. Just I must attain enlightenment. That's kind of part of bodhicitta, but that's still mixed with one's own. It can be like thinking I must attain nirvana. It's for my benefit. But if it's conjoined with a real motivating factor, desiring others to be free of suffering, having experienced renunciation in your own mind to see that there's nothing within cyclic existence, it's real pleasure, and that most of it's, hardship. There's a lot of, and wishing others, out of empathy, wishing others to be free of that. All suffering, all sentient beings, what the Mahayana calls great compassion, by oneself alone, wanting to do that. Then adding the factor that I must attain enlightenment, that becomes what's called bodhicitta. It doesn't mean that other realizations, other spiritual states are worthless or not useful, but it is not exactly bodhicitta. That's right. Yeah.
So what would be the position of Christ then, or Jesus?
Well, I think many Tibetan lamas I've talked to, they think that Christ was a great bodhisattva.
That's what I meant.
Yeah, I think His Holiness the Dalai Lama says you can't judge because the tenets that are taught by some founder of another religion don't seem to be the fully defined presentation of Buddhism. Doesn't mean that they're not emanations of the omniscient mind out of skillful means. Even the Buddha himself, in his own teaching, taught to some people there is an ego, and so forth, and taught things that were not ultimately, finally true for skillful means to guide them. He told Ajata Shastru, how do you say? Ajata Shastru, I think, the king, the son of the king, the prince who killed his father, who was one of the great, I think it was Bimbisara, King Bimbisara, who was the benefactor of Buddha, and his son eventually brought about his death, imprisoned him, and the father died in prison, and he committed some of the other very heavy negative actions. And the Buddha taught him that, first of all, it's good to kill your mother and father. When he first went to the prison to see him, because he was so overcome with grief and remorse that he wasn't even able to have a clear mind. So the Buddha first taught him that, and the sort of the implied meaning of that was it was good to kill the father and mother. It was exemplary to kill the father and mother of our own delusions, self-grasping mind and so forth. But let's go on a little bit further. Let's go on, and I'm going to go just before the break. Let's go a couple more verses, and we can talk about some of this again, okay? Good questions. What do you think? So bodhicitta is conceptual or non-conceptual?
Conceptual.
Must be conceptual, right? It's accompanied by conceptual minds aspiring for enlightenment. That's the main thing that accompanies it. And it's preceded by, and usually accompanied by, great compassion. When it's said preceded by great compassion, it doesn't mean that great compassion is not present, but it means that any one moment of bodhicitta had to have a causal motivation before it, which was compassion, and is accompanied by, at that moment, wishing to attain enlightenment. So if you're not wishing to attain enlightenment, motivated by out of compassion, it's not bodhicitta.
Is it reductive? In other words, is it always there, and we reduce it by eliminating all of these, self-grasping, self-cherishing, all the stuff that we're talking about?
Is it always there, that wish for enlightenment?
Right. Is it?
I don't think so. I don't know. And maybe there's some way of understanding that.
That's what I don't get. Is it always there, and or is it something that you evolve?
When we talk about Buddha nature, we say the Buddha nature is always there, but that doesn't mean that we're already Buddha, right? Yeah. So the aspiration for enlightenment I've never heard anyone say that that's always there and we just have to sort of eliminate some obstacle to it. Although some people understand enlightenment that way, that we are already enlightened. We just have to realize it, some phraseology. But that's not the Gelugpa position is that, not only linguistically, but pedagogically, there's some error there to think that we could be enlightened and not know it.
Well,
So what is meant, what the Gelugpa tradition, Lama Tsongkhapa's tradition, usually it's said that that it's a big mistake to think that. I've heard Lama Zopa Rinpoche very, debate with people about that.
I'm not asking that.
I understand, but I'm just.
asking is it a reductive or is it an additive process? Basically, that's what I'm trying to get to.
It's both. In order to develop realization, you have to both add something to the mind stream, qualities that we don't yet have. We have to, or enhance those that we have a little of, and you have to eliminate obstacles, wrong ways of thinking, which are hindrances to that. It's like, in order to grow a nice garden, you have to take out the stones and the roots and the other kinds of things that are obstacles to the growing. And then you have to enhance that by putting in some fertilizer, irrigation, make sure that there's no shade, not too much shade, that there's sunlight to be able to grow. So you have to have the cooperative conditions, and you have to eliminate those that are called contradictory conditions or adverse conditions. And so that basically means both creating virtuous karma and eliminating negativities at the beginning.
Right.
Then later, developing positive qualities of mind. Once the mind has that kind of fertilization, you have an accumulation of merit, then you have the chance of developing bodhicitta. Without accumulation of merit, very difficult. Even you think about bodhicitta all the time, it won't take root. And especially if there's a lot of negativities, negative karma, instincts from past lives that are like impulses that propel you into negative actions that become, contradictory. Your mind becomes clouded and so forth that you can't. So it's both and additive, as you said, and reductive. I don't know if that's the words you use. I guess that's kind of it. So let's just go a little bit further, just before the break. Do we have 1 minute? Was that?
No, I was gonna.
Oh, that was one. No, one question. No. Okay. So, where did we get last time? To 43?
Yeah.
We finished 43 or finished 42? Okay. So 43 says, when I'm deceived by others' cunning, it is the weapon of my own evil deeds turned upon me, or the wheel of sharp weapons coming back, for increasing my selfishness, pride, and insatiable greed. It's due to and sort of enhancing those things. The Tibetan says rangde, which they translate as selfishness. That means just increasing your selfishness, you might say, your own desires, following your own desires. Ngagyal means pride. And here, topde means, top means hunger. So desire and hunger. So they translate that as insatiable greed. From now on, I shall markedly reduce all of them. When I'm deceived by others' cunning. So anyone have any thought about that one? What's the relationship? What does it seem like there's any obvious relationship between being deceived by others in the sense of their trickiness, their cunning, and your own having, indulged in selfishness and pride and greed? Is any kind of thought? What do you think?
It's the same thing. It's from what I read in all of these, when something happens to us, it's that sharp weapon turning right around instead of going. It's like a blade that's pointed so sharp, and it hits the enemy that, from our own side, and it turns right around to face us again, so.
Right.
I see that.
Right, in general, but I was just wondering if you saw any particular connection here between this result that supposedly we might be experiencing and the particular causes, karmic causes of it. Geshe said in his commentary, when others cheat and deceive us, it is because in the past we have been very egotistical and arrogant. Here the word was pride and selfish and so forth. We have thought ourselves to be the cleverest, most handsome, maybe beautiful, and so on. We've continued greedily to only receive from others. So we thought of ourselves. So now it's the wheel of sharp weapons returns. So we should have less, in the future we should have less arrogance, greed, and cultivate contentment. So here it says, from now on I shall markedly reduce all of them. What would be contentment? That would be the opposite of insatiability, right? Always, never having enough, always wanting more. And so we should have less greed, arrogance, and cultivate contentment. So I think that's generally our state, that mainly when we're thinking of ourselves all the time, and in so doing, we may actually create the karma. We actually sometimes are cunning in getting our way, isn't it? We kind of deceive others. So this is the karmic result of that. Now this next stanza, I think, do you notice here anything funny in the next stanza? Did anyone read ahead? In the printed text here. Some of you have the books. Oh, no one has the printed text? In the printed text here, the next verse is 44, and the verse after that is 46. Okay. Yeah, where's 45? Okay. So that's wrong. So I thought 45 went somewhere. I don't know. So this one, 44. When I am sidetracked by attachment or aversion while studying or teaching, it is the weapon of my own evil deeds turned upon me. For not considering my own, what is it? Devilish faults. From now on I shall examine these impediments and abandon them. That's what here in the text, the typist, you know how you start to type one verse, and then you turn away, someone said, hey, what time is it? Did you read the paper today? Did Ben Affleck get married yet? Oh, then you come back and you do the last two lines of the next stanza. So that's obviously what happened here. So because they have the next two lines of the next stanza in what was printed in this piece of paper. In your book, it's correct. Another translation of that first part is here's when I am sidetracked by attachment or aversion when studying or teaching. The version that was done in Dharamsala, they translated it a different way. When the force of attraction or repulsion colors whatever we hear or say. So they're taking studying or teaching, meaning hearing or saying. So it's a little of both, I think. When you are sidetracked or distracted by attachment or aversion, or you can say attraction or repulsion. When you study, when you hear teachings, your mind is disturbed by attachment or repulsion. Or when you're talking or teaching, this is the wheel of sharp weapons coming back for not considering our own demonic faults. We haven't considered them in the past because we haven't paid attention to them. We haven't considered them as faults, and so now they're still rising up, even when we're trying to listen to the teachings. So from now on, I shall examine these impediments and abandon them. Okay, so we're going to take a little break here. Is that okay? And then we'll start back. Same time, same station. Yeah, you can say, yeah. So the Venerable asked a question in the break. She said, what's the difference between perception and projection? I thought, well, do you think someone thought they were the same maybe because they sound the same? Projection and perception. Perception.
Projection's a perception anyway.
Is projection a perception?
According to your definition before, it would be a facsimile, right? Because the only thing that you can project is a non-existent thing, right?
Well, we have everything that, according to Prasangika, everything that we experience, all the outer world that seems to exist to us is a projection of our mind. It doesn't really exist the way that it appears as findable outside. Doesn't mean that there's not a findable reality outside. There's different kinds of projections. Generally, in Buddhism, when we talk about projections, we talk about superimpositions and what would we call the opposite? Denigrations, maybe? Denials. Superimposition. Actually, both are kind of superimpositions, but superimposition is like adding something outside that's not really there, thinking that there's something there that's not really there. And a denial is kind of like denying the appearances of something that's actually there that may even be appearing to you, but denying it in some way to your own mind. So those are both kind of projections in a sense. Superimposing and taking away, you might say. It's almost like you're oblivious to something that's really there. So perception depends on how you're using that word. When we're talking about perception, usually it's referring, the way that we're translating it in the Lorik text is a state of mind which is not conceptual, perceiving. I mean, you could talk about other kinds of perception. Usually we're talking about direct perception as opposed to conception. Perception is a state of mind in which you know the object by the force of that object directly appearing to one of your consciousnesses. And conception is the state of mind, a kind of consciousness which is mental, and by which you know the object by some kind of image of it. You know, the object is not actually appearing directly. That's not the main thing appearing to your consciousness, the way that you're knowing it. Like if you have a conception of poverty or the conception of impermanence or a conception of the horns of a rabbit, there's some kind of appearance to your mind, in your mind, a mental image that you're seemingly knowing something, via which you're seemingly knowing something. So perception is usually the way that, I mean, you can use it other ways. You can, as Thea was saying before, she was saying all projections are perceptions, aren't they? You could use it in that way. You could say perception is any kind of act in which you are knowing something, but the way that we've been using the word here, although you don't have to, is talking about direct perception as opposed to conception. So projection is when you, from one point of view, might be the state of mind when you're projecting something outside that is not really there, or denying something that is there. Okay. So.
I'm sorry. So
Why?
does that mean that
What
there's
did you
only
do?
one? I just need.
Yeah.
There's only one direct perception. Then?
There's only one. What do you mean? There's only one.
So there's only one thing that can be directly perceived.
What's that?
The nature of reality.
I can directly perceive the. Are these roses?
Those are a mental image. It's a label.
Those are mental images? Give me a break. It's not a mental image.
I see it as a rose, but in the terms that you just, I mean, from a Buddhist perspective.
What's this one? Is this a rose? Who knows?
Yeah, it's a rose.
No, that's a bunch of shapes and colors and things.
That's not a rose.
It's a label imputed on a base.
From the both, almost all the Buddhist schools would say there is some kind of, other than, say, the Chittamatra, the mind-only school, there is some kind of external reality. Even Prasangika says there are conventional roses. Lama Tsongkhapa, the Nagarjuna, Chandrakirti, all accept conventional reality. But the way that conventional reality exists is much different than the way that we perceive it, because there is an appearance. When we label rose upon those shapes and colors, which is the only way that rose can be said to exist conventionally, is just as an imputation, or you say projection, a valid projection. On the other hand, as soon as we do that, because of habitual familiarization over numberless lives, it seems that rose, quote unquote, is now coming, there's really a rose out there appearing to us from that side.
Yes.
Someone said, this kind of thing with these shaped leaves, this is called a rose. And so you say, a rose. And then suddenly it looks like rose is existing to you. So those two things are mixed together, those two appearances. The appearance of a truly existent rose and the appearance of a conventionally existent rose, which you're just imputing. And we're dominated, when we don't understand emptiness, you're mainly dominated by that appearance of everything. That's the main thing that appears to you. Things appear to be truly existent, even to a 10th level bodhisattva when they're not in meditation on emptiness. But that doesn't mean there's not a conventional reality. There is a conventional bani.
I'm all for the conventional reality. It's pretty much all I know. It's pretty much all I know. But,
Right?
But,
Otherwise, I was going to tell your daughter or your son that you don't exist. You're only shapes and colors.
It seemed to me that you define perception as seeing something as it actually is. And so then in that case, I would say no.
No, I didn't. I
I'm
don't
not
think I
perceiving.
said that. I said
Oh, then I missed
perception
it.
is
So I'm glad I
is a
asked.
state of consciousness in which you know an object by the force of that object appearing directly to the consciousness, not via a mental image.
Again, I know it via a mental image, and that's why it's appearing in my consciousness.
No, you don't. Even if you don't know, rose, a cow and turns its head here, doesn't have a mental image of the word rose, the sound generality of rose, but it may know, that one tastes good, may have a conceptual understanding of what we call rose.
But how could we have where I perceive rose and then someone who doesn't
These are
know
questions for
perceives
low-rate
orange?
class. Otherwise, we're never going to finish. We've got 120 verses. You have to come on Thursdays now.
And you're gonna answer all the questions?
I'll answer those questions on Thursdays. Okay? Not this coming Thursday. This coming Thursday we have a break, right? So
When whatever questions you ask the teacher are
Not this
going to be
Thursday.
answered on Thursday.
it's verse number. Yeah. The verses, the ones about mental images and how we know. That's the low-rate class, right? Otherwise, we'll never. It's very tempting. I remember when we were studying with Geshe Tekchok at Manjushri Institute, when we were studying tenets and some other courses, and we had all of these questions. And Geshe tried to very skillfully, say, oh, even teaching so many years all of the Tibetan monks at the monastery, no one ever asked so many imaginative questions about the subject. And he kept on, so sometimes we didn't finish the whole. I mean, he was able to, very skillfully, because he's a great teacher, able to finish the subject matter, but we have to curb, sort of like to go through the subject, and then that particular topic about how we know and what constitutes conventional reality and ultimate reality, these are things that we have to, we can investigate a little bit here and there, but to really go into it, we have to have it's worth trying to have the same vocabulary, because we've already defined in low rig, and we will when we talk about mind and mental factors, what a primary mind is, secondary mind, perception, conception, mental image. And then once you've drawn the general, have a general idea of that, it's like drawing the outline of a picture, then you can put in the details. If you try to put in the details without knowing the general outline, then it's kind of difficult. I don't know many artists who can do that, because you can just, maybe some people can. So let's go a little bit further here. So when I am sidetracked, considering I didn't consider my own demonic faults. I see, that's the reason. This is talking about, by our own attachment or aversion, not by Bonnie's questions, not when you're studying. What's that? When you're sidetracked when studying or teaching by Bonnie's questions, it is the weapon of your own yielded. Okay, so then the next one, 45, although in the printed text here, it's kind of someone skipped over. There's some term for that. People that, over the ages, the great Christian monks that used to write the text, there's some term for when you skip from middle of one verse to the middle of the next. So the next one, 45, says, when all the good I've done turns out badly, it's the wheel of sharp weapons. What is that? The weapon of my own evil deeds turned upon me, for not considering for repaying kindness with ingratitude. When all the good I've done turns out badly, it's the wheel of sharp weapons coming back for repaying kindness with ingratitude. From now on, I shall very respectfully repay kindness. So, up till now, when all the good we've done turns out badly, I'll read you one of the other translations here. When no matter how well meant our actions toward others, they always elicit a hostile response. This is the wheel of sharp weapons returning full circle upon us for wrongs we have done. Till now we have repaid loving kindness with malice. Hereafter let's accept others' favors, both graciously and with most humble respect. So a little more flavorful, although it's added some commentarial words. Sometimes the fellows who tried to translate this may have lost some of the taste, I think, in not getting exactly the flavor. So when it says, when all the good I've done turns out badly, no matter how well meant our actions, the good actions that we've done, turns out badly means we don't get the respect or the gratitude that we would expect. Does that ever happen? You do things for people and they don't feel gratitude for that? It's a completely unheard of, right? In the meeting that we had yesterday about universal education, there was a question about what's the difference between gratitude and rejoicing. Is there a difference? When you feel gratitude for something, does that mean you're rejoicing? It's a different state of mind, isn't it?
Yes.
And someone was thinking they meant the same thing. So when the actions that we do don't elicit any kind of positive response, people are either they don't pay attention to what we've done, or it actually elicits some negative response from them. This is caused by our own karma. We could not experience this, let's put it that way, unless we had created the karma for this in the past. It's the wheel of sharp weapons coming back. Because in the past, when others have been kind to us, we have not, been grateful for that. We have taken them for granted, maybe taken advantage of them and so forth. So this is the same kind of thing coming back toward us now. So with all of these stanzas, there's many ways of thinking about it. You can think, when this happens now, I can bear this because this is the diminishing of my negative karma of the past. This can be like an aha moment. You call that? What do we call that? A realization, oh, wow, this is what I've done. I find also, because I get so much negative response from all the negative actions I've done in the past, it gives me a chance to dwell occasionally on compassion for others, because I know how bad I feel, when I try to do something for others and they don't appreciate that. Or appreciation, that's the other word, isn't it? They don't appreciate, they're not grateful. Then you know how bad you feel, or how bad I feel, then that gives me a feeling of trying to do the opposite, not to be ungrateful to others, or not just to be ungrateful, not to be antagonistic. It doesn't always work, but anyway. So now the next 2 or 3 are kind of condensing up things. That was what, 40, 45? 46. In short, in brief, when calamities befall me, it is the weapon of my own evil deeds turned upon me, like a smith killed by his own sword. Should that be a capital S? Is that a misprint? No. What does that mean, smith? Blacksmith, right? Or a whitesmith. Okay? Killed by his or her own sword. From now on, I shall be heedful of my own sinful actions. So what's the point here? What's the analogy that's being given? So this is kind of like a condensation of all of these couple of verses. Like when anything happens that's untoward, when the adverse conditions arise, calamities befall me, when junk happens, you know the word in the West. There's some word, stronger word. Junk happens. When doo-doo falls, it is the weapon of my own evil deeds turned upon me, like a smith killed by his own sword. So the example here is that a person who makes weapons creates the opportunity to possibly be killed by them. You know, like the gun makers, and the weapon makers in America. They might, or the people who are engaging in making all of the different kinds of dangerous things, they themselves could be killed, even in the real world, by those same things. But the karma is much more efficient than that. Because even if you make weapons in the world, you're not necessarily going to be killed by that very same weapon now. But if you create karma, in some lifetime, you are going to experience the result of that, like being impaled upon your own sword. When you create the weapon, you're going to experience the result of that. 47, when I experience suffering in the wretched states of existence, it's the weapon of my own evil deeds turned upon me, like a fletcher killed by his own arrow. From now on, I shall be heedful of my own sinful actions. What is a fletcher? This is calling upon your... Who fletches? Where does that come? Fletches.
That's a capital F.
That's a capital. Fletcher. How did they translate? Mm-hmm. It comes from feather. Someone who puts feathers on. A fletcher. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
No, I think that's true.
Forger of arrows, they translated it. Mm-hmm. It's Tibetan, that's what the Tibetan says, yeah.
It seems like it probably depends on what the motivation of why you're making the sword. I mean, if you make it out of a good motivation, it doesn't mean that everyone who works in these factories or produces them. It seems like it's dependent on what's going on in your mind.
Right. This is just an outer example, obviously, Venerable, right? Because this is just giving an example. Like there are situations in the world when someone who has created a weapon is killed by it. It doesn't mean everyone that does is killed by it. In the same way, this is just an analogy for the wheel of sharp weapons. We've forged, the blacksmith of our mind, the self-cherishing thought and ego-grasping, creating the delusions, creating the karma, have created a wheel of sharp weapons, forged a sword that will definitely come back and kill us like that. Like the possibility in the world of someone. So you're right. I don't. The implication is not that everyone who engages in making swords or things like that will necessarily create negative karma. But one wonders, the motivation. Generally, even if you're not motivated to harm others, if you're engaged in a company that whose livelihood depends upon weapons of destruction, like you're working for a poison gas company or a tear gas company or whatever, or the company that makes torture equipment or something like that. You just do the books. Oh no, I don't make the equipment. I just do the books, I just sell the product. Still, I think creates, because your motivation may not be to harm other people. It may be completely materialistic and worldly, but that's what the Buddha called wrong livelihood. Correct livelihood, right livelihood, is when not only don't you have the motivation, the actions that you do are not motivated to harm others, they don't have the effect of harming others directly. Of course, you can't be sure, but you don't, for instance, if you work for a big gun factory or something like that, I hope, is it Charlton Heston?
Mhm.
I hope he's not listening to this. Excuse me, Charlton. Yes?
Last weekend, my father said, as a Christian, he had some question about what he had done because he was an aeronautical engineer and actually helped to design the homing mechanism for the smart bomb, the one that they actually showed going down the chimney.
Right, you told me about that, huh?
And
Yeah.
so last weekend, he said, now, I have some question about what I did. It's been years
Mhm.
designing these kinds of
Mhm.
things. And so I didn't say, and I just said, it's good to look at that, to think
Mhm.
about that. But I didn't, and I wonder, because his motivation, as he has told me, was not to do that, to create destruction, but rather to create protection,
Right.
thinking that he was creating something that was going to be protecting his family. So I appreciated what Angie said.
Yeah, no, it's definitely true. It depends on your motivation, but
Sorry, Josh,
Yeah.
what I was wondering is, because of the power of the object, even if you're going on neutral, or just, kind of get another job, and you don't have a particularly strong motivation either there, even materialistic, but because of the fact that you're creating powerful objects, is the object in itself quite a powerful determining factor of what the outcome's going to be, even though the motivation's not particularly strong, like killing or something as well.
yeah, I think the main thing, the karmic consequences on you, for the most part, are due to your motivation and secondarily due to the actual results. Like sometimes when our loved ones are suffering, and maybe we feel that, or our dog, or the classic example is we put the dog down, is that what they say? Or the horse down, put them out of their misery. Actually, they may not be so miserable, but the implication is maybe they wouldn't be so happy, lame, or something like that any longer. One, in so doing, one creates some negative karma, even with a good motivation. If you had an exemplary motivation, like a real bodhicitta motivation, and you saw with wisdom what the consequences were, some lamas argue that you wouldn't create any negative karma at all. Other lamas say that still you create some small negative karma, but then the virtue of your good motivation and your coupled with your wisdom, knowing the effect of that, far outweighs that. So there's some debate even amongst the lamas. Lama Zopa Rinpoche these days is generally leans in the direction that you wouldn't create any negative karma at all. Other lamas say that, when in certain circumstances like that, like say euthanasia or suicide or something, definitely you create negative karma. Certainly in the case of suicide, just taking our own life, because unless, for instance, we were an incredible burden to others, because usually the reason for committing suicide is out of some inability to put up with the suffering, being impatient, and so forth, and not seeing the possibility that one can actually benefit, that there actually is some benefit from this. It takes a certain courageous mind to make that step. Let's go on a little bit further here, because these are kind of the condensed, the summarized ones. When the 48, so this was like 47, like a arrow maker, the forger of arrows, killed by their own arrow. So a similar kind of thing. That's an example that in Atisha's presentation about anger when he came to Tibet, he talked about the karma, he talked about the arrow and the target. If you didn't set the arrow in motion, there's no way that it could have hit the target. So it's like in the past life, we set the arrow in motion. We forged the weapon, we forged the arrow, we shot it off. And even if you didn't set the arrow in motion, even some target comes up now, some adverse condition, you wouldn't necessarily suffer as a result of that. It wouldn't impinge upon your life. Someone else who shot the arrow would get angry or unhappy or whatever. Okay? So that analogy is used in other places. 48, when the suffering of the householder befall me, sufferings of the householder befall me, the lay life. What are those? Any sufferings of the lay life?
None.
None whatsoever. Only the monks and nuns suffer. It is the weapon of my own evil deeds turned upon me, like parents killed by their cherished son. From now on, it is right for me to leave worldly life forever, or as maybe you could say, in all lives. From now on, I should have the thought to, just from youth, to take ordination, to live the life of renunciation. The famous prayer of Lama Tsongkhapa, the prayer of the virtuous beginning, middle, and end. Have you heard of that? Very nice prayer. Lama Tsongkhapa. Sometimes, for a little friend of mine in New York, I was the godfather. I guess you'd have to say the Buddha father. So I read the prayer of the virtuous beginning, middle, and end. So praying, Lama Tsongkhapa praying that in all my lives at the beginning, may I, be born to a family that takes care. May I be surrounded by spiritual beings. May I be, already at youth, be predisposed to leaving the householder life, to take ordination, have a sense of renunciation, not to get caught up in all of the attractions of the world. And the middle, studying and practicing. At the end, to benefit others with the teachings and so forth. It can mean many different beginning, middles, and ends, because this is the beginning of our spiritual path also. And praying in the middle, may we be able to practice and develop all the good qualities, and as they come into fruition, benefit others. So here it says, when the sufferings of the household life, the lay life, befall me, it's the weapon of the wheel of sharp weapons coming back, like parents killed by their cherished son. What's the meaning there? Are parents ever killed by their cherished son? Or, mentors killed by their cherished pupils, or are injured, or whatever, right? So, what are some of the sufferings of the householder life? Are there any? Are they all joys? Having to work, not having any freedom, not having time, worries, jealousy when your baby leaves you.
But I reject this whole premise that just because a person is a monk or a nun, that they have developed enough renunciation, that they don't act like a householder.
Excuse me, that's not my premise. It's not my premise. There's no premise here that they don't act. No. A monk or nun is not necessarily someone who is devoid of that kind of state of mind, right? They can engage in. Pardon?
It even says that in the commentary.
What?
In this commentary.
What?
It says that they too can get wrapped up in the worldly day-to-day
Yeah.
living and so forth.
Yeah, it's just talking about there are particular shortcomings of samsaric life and especially the family life. When you're attracted to that, before you enter into it, if you evaluate that, there's so many temptations, loving partner, maybe children to love and to cherish. And then we might rationalize that it gives us a chance to practice bodhicitta and patience and everything. Maybe. But there's so many shortcomings of all of these, of that kind of lay life. The Buddha himself took the aspect of renouncing that. Even he had all of the best things. So it's not a conducive condition necessarily for the practice of the spiritual path.
I think that maybe the lay life has more distractions from the spiritual life.
Wow, that's a really profound observation. Yeah.
Raising children, I think, is one of the ultimate acts of selflessness. And what about all the mother and father kind beings that
That I'm always talking about all the time. Yep. Indeed. Indeed. Yeah, incredibly kind.
I have a friend who's a monk, and once we were having a really good friend, so we're having a real person conversation. So I decided I would ask him. So when you became ordained, sorry, were you like trying to escape from something?
Uh-huh.
And he just said, yeah.
Mhm.
And then we had really casual conversation, but I walked away thinking, well, oh, that would be refuge. It's like rather than going to work or plunging into a career out of fear and
Mhm.
turning to something that you think would help, that taking on roads, I don't know, just totally shifted
There are different
my
ways of
mind.
escaping. Some people think practicing spiritual path in general is this kind of escapism, isn't it? Becoming a monk or nun. And there are different ways. If one simply enters into a retreat, even as a layperson, a retreat, so some people say, oh, you're just escaping from your problems, Or becoming a monk or nun, some people might think you're not being realistic, you're just escaping. You're not making a meaningful contribution. The point is what you do with that time. If when the point of retreating or leaving the world, that's the expression that we take for taking ordination, rabjung, like in the Indian tradition, the way it was usually translated as leaving home. It means leaving the lay life. The reason for doing so is because there's so many distractions in that it's hard to see the forest for the trees, hard to really see and develop those good qualities that we have not yet developed, and hard to eliminate, because we're so distracted, the faults. So if you can retreat away from that for some time and have a calm mind, just like when we do meditation at the beginning, if we calm our mind for some time, right? We let all other thoughts go. Then with that clear mind, you're able to, attend to various kinds of reasonings. Look at the faults in your own mind realistically, look at the qualities that are not yet there, and put some time in developing them. When you're constantly buffeted by different kinds of worries in the world, it takes the exceptional person to be able to utilize a lay life to practice. It's not impossible, but it's not the optimal. So a person who escapes simply like, they had problem with the opposite sex, or they have problems with, they don't want to work, that's not really the correct motivation for taking ordination. If one's at least has some sense of renunciation, some sense of sensing the suffering nature of cyclic existence, and then you take the time to go away from those distractions to work on them, then you can come back into the world to help others. You can be there for others. You can manifest as a Buddha when need be. There's the famous ox herding pictures. You know the ox herding pictures in Zen Buddhism? Oh.
What's that?
Thanks for asking. There's maybe in Ram Dass's book, it's not the only source of the ox herding pictures. It's a famous Zen pictures, sort of in the, how they draw the ink drawings with a brush. A little boy has lost his ox, and then he's seeking the ox, and then sees the footprints, first traces, and then sees it and sees the tail amongst the what's it called? The rice paddies. Then tracks it, catches it, tames it, brings it home. And then I think the seventh picture was, or sixth picture, ox forgotten. Sort of like the seventh picture, the boy is sitting on the veranda, now he can relax, ox forgotten. And then the eighth picture, which sometimes with the end one, was just the circle now with nothing inside, all forgotten. And then it came back again, and then again there are the fences, the houses, again after that experience of vacuity or emptiness. Then in the 10th picture was in the marketplace. So he's in the marketplace like the archetypal was it the Fool in the tarot card, with the little thing over his shoulder, coming into the marketplace, to be with others. So the purpose of working on our mind is not to escape and all of you are dumb, I'm renouncing you. That's not renunciation. Renunciation means renouncing the problems in your own mind and saying, well, for the time being, I can't cope. I can't love you because it's my fault. I'm going to go back and work on my mind so that I can love you, that I can be compassionate, that I won't be angry, that I can bear suffering. I'm going to work on my own mind. So if that's the reason one takes ordination, then it's going to be beneficial. Same thing with meditation on just watching the breathing, say. Some of my friends that have done Satipatthana in Theravada tradition for some years, you know what I'm talking about, the breathing meditations, sometimes they call Vipassana. Maybe for a decade, they invest a lot of time. They have some good periods of quiet, but then they get to the point where they say, well, I can't control my mind. I still can't control my mind. It's almost like the example I've given before is like the bills are on the table, like big problems are there. You just you forget about them. It's like going on vacation or escaping, right? No problems. Weeks you're sitting, then you open up your eyes, the bills are still there. Unless you did something in your meditation, if it's only escapism and you haven't worked on your mind, the bills are still there. You're still going to have to be paid. The wheel of sharp weapons is still going to be there. So the point of taking ordination like that, the retreating away from the distractions of the family life, lay life, is to be able to work on the mind with less distraction. If you are an exceptional person and you can do that as a lay person, I'm not saying maybe the spread of Buddhism in the West will mainly depend on lay practitioners, but the Buddha himself took the aspect. This is how he himself manifested as a renunciate, first taking lay life and leaving that. So here it's just saying, when the sufferings of the householder befall me, it's the weapon of my own evil deeds turned upon me, like parents killed by their cherished son. From now on, it is right for me to leave worldly life forever. Here says forever means in every lifetime, it would be appropriate for me to have that kind of mind, to think, to leave that, not to get enmeshed in the worldly life. You know the story of Atisha, when just before he was about to get married to one girl that his parents had selected for him. He was a prince, right? He had the dream. Tara appeared to him and said, it's not right for the great elephant to get caught in the swamp. You know how a big elephant, if an elephant gets caught in the swamp, it's curtains, right? Because they're so big and they'll sink. So he was saying that Atisha had been someone who'd practiced the path for so many lives, so it was inappropriate for them to get caught up in the swamp of worldly life. So these are kind of condensation. Then the 49th verse, since that's the way it is, I seize the enemy. I seize the thief who ambushed and deceived me, the hypocrite who deceived me disguised as myself. Aha, it is ego clinging without a doubt. Doesn't sound very poetic, doesn't it? See how they translate it. As is true what I have said about self-centered interest, I recognize clearly my enemy now. I recognize clearly the bandit who plunders, the liar who lures by pretending he is part of me. Oh, what relief that I have conquered this doubt. So up till now, this has been talking about all of the shortcomings, enumerating. Now it's starting to talk about making that decision. Having seen all of those shortcomings, then making the decision, this is the real enemy. Because you were asking about, right before, when are we going to get down to the nitty-gritty? since that's how it is, it's referring to all these verses since I think 7 or something, 7 until 48. I seize the enemy. That means I perceive who the enemy is. I recognize who the enemy is. I recognize the thief who ambushed and deceived me. The hypocrite who deceived me disguised as myself. This disguised as myself, what is that? What's the implication of that? What is this talking about here?
Self-cherishing.
Yeah, which one? Self-cherishing or self-grasping or both? Or what?
Seeing oneself, disguised as oneself.
Personal identity and self-cherishing is what it says in the book.
Mm-hmm. But what is it when it's?
No, that's referring to the number 7 to 48.
What it says here, disguised as oneself. What is that talking about?
Mental affliction.
Disguise. I have been deceived. The hypocrite who has deceived me, disguised as myself. What is the hypocrite that's being talked about here? Is that the appearance of the self, or is that the self-grasping?
Well,
It'd be
are those
both.
synonymous?
It's
Because
grasping onto
you're
the appearance.
grasping at this appearance that you think that you are. And so, because you haven't realized what you truly are. And so you're
Which is what?
grasping at something, well, the Buddha nature, because it comes up
Hmm.
together. And
So there's no conventional Oma?
Yes, oh, boy, you better believe it.
What did I say? Uh-oh.
No doubt about that.
Okay.
But,
Okay.
for right now anyway. But,
Let me just read what Geshe says here. This 49, with 48, I think, concludes a section of verses presenting a detailed description of the painful effects of the view of a real personal identity and self-cherishing attitude. So that means up through 48 is talking about all of the shortcomings of self-cherishing thought and self-grasping, right? When it says the view of a real personal identity, that's when we talk about mind and mental factors, that's the wrong view of the transitory collection. Have you heard of that before? The jikta, jiksokla tawa, the wrong view of the transitory collection. So it means viewing the conventional self, which is legitimately labeled on the aggregates, the transitory collection, viewing that conventional self, but conceiving it, that's the referent object, those of you who are studying Lyric, but conceiving it as truly existent self. The lower tenets would take the meaning a little bit differently. They'd say actually viewing the changeable collection, not viewing the conventional self, viewing the changeable collection as a self-supporting, substantially existent person, perhaps. They have a slightly different interpretation of that view, but that's why Geshe is talking about view of the personal identity. That's talking about a particular kind of ignorance, so the ego grasping. This verse, 49, points to a clear realization of the real problem and shows how to destroy the inner enemies with the help of the tutelary deity. I don't think Geshe said that. Yamantaka. The previous verses are not exaggerations. They really show how the inner enemies are the root cause of everything undesirable in cyclic existence. In the past, you did not recognize them. You obeyed those terrible thieves who hid out and robbed you of your wealth of wholesome qualities that bring peace and happiness. They are much worse than ordinary thieves who just take property or money. They have cleverly deceived us by masquerading as ourselves so that we don't even recognize them as enemies. So I think that's one of the points here. All of these, the self-grasping, the anger, attachment, sometimes we identify with them. We think, although that is not actually who we are, we think, I am angry, I am bad, I am good, sort of truly existently, and we identify with these things. Our selfishness makes us the center of the world, and it seems natural and beneficial to us. Now, through study, reflection, and meditation, we have finally unmasked the enemies who have imprisoned us in painful cyclic existence for such a long time. At this time, you utter an exclamation of recognition. In Tibetan, we say Emma, like when you do the puja, say Emma ho, Emma. It's not like Emma Thompson or something. This is Emma, which is like like what do they say? Like aha. Emma. I mean, like wow. It can be like wow or whoa. It can be different kinds of things. Something like, now I know the real enemies that must be destroyed. Since that's the way it is, that's talking about all these other things, I recognize the enemy. Here, seize is talking about a mental grasping or mental, understanding. I recognize the thief who ambushed and deceived me, or maybe the thieves, the hypocrites who deceived me disguised as myself. The other text instead of said the hypocrite, the liar who lures by pretending he is part of me. Okay? So this is, it is ego clinging without a doubt. So ego clinging, is that the same as self-cherishing thought? What is ego clinging?
Self-grasping?
So what we call self-grasping, just another way of translating, right? So 50, now, O Yamantaka, raise the weapon of action and spin it furiously over your head 3 times. Spread far apart your feet, which are the 2 truths. Open wide your eyes of method and wisdom, and bare your fangs of the 4 powers, and pierce the enemy. So this is, again, the Dharmarakshita, who is the author of this text, as we understand it in this tradition, who was outwardly a practitioner of the Theravada. Somehow he had connection with not only the Mahayana in general, but also these tantric teachings. So here, in particular, to deal with, Yamataka is a wrathful form of Manjushri. Okay, there's a very beautiful statue of Manjushri. There's Manjushri, holding the sword of this peaceful form of Manjushri. Yamantaka is a wrathful form of Manjushri, the manifestation of the omniscient mind's realization of emptiness. So calling upon this wrathful form to help us to develop the wisdom that realizes things. So that's going to be the antidote of self-grasping especially. And in particular, the wrathful form of the deities in some of the tantras, within the tantras, there's a way of utilizing not only attachment or desire, but some kind of that aversion energy within us. You can actually harness that and be like Yamantaka. Who's Yamantaka angry at?
Lord of Death.
He's angry at the Lord of Death?
The delusion. The inner delusion.
He's not angry at Don? Not angry at me? Like Shantideva says, if it were to be right to be angry at anything, it should be what? Your own ignorance, right? Or the delusions in general. So Yamantaka is not angry and not wrathful with other people. Even if he might show that wrathful aspect, or the gurus are not angry at us. They're angry at our delusions. And sometimes they take that wrathful aspect to help to speed that along. So here, if we call upon Yamantaka to help to develop that understanding that we could even utilize our own wrath to remind us to be angry at our own egocentric ignorance rather than to be angry at other people. So immediately imagining yourself as Yamantaka, perhaps, that can give some different realization. When you feel that angry energy coming, to imagine yourself as a wrathful deity might have some effect like that. So what are some of the other things here? Now, O Yamantaka, raise the weapon of action and spin it furiously over your head 3 times. Did Geshe-la mention anything, commentary here about 3 times?
Living for the past, present, and future?
Now, here, Geshe Darge's commentary, which I don't know if it was something they got afterwards, he said, which one was this? Verse 50, right? He said in note 14, we request Yamataka to turn the wheel of sharp weapons 3 times. These 3 refer to the conventional or relative level of truth on which conventional bodhicitta operates as the means for leading both self and others to enlightenment, the ultimate level of truth on which ultimate bodhicitta functions as the wisdom understanding voidness, and these 2 levels of truth realized together. So apparently there was some, when they asked about that point, maybe in the commentaries it came talking about these circling at 3 times. It's not talking about turning the 3 wheels of Dharma. This is talking about the 3, spinning this wheel of action 3 times. So understanding the conventional level of truth, the ultimate level of truth. Who understands the 2 level of truths together? Pardon?
Only an enlightened being.
Only enlightened being. So sometimes in Tantra there's some ways of trying to practice that now, imagining yourself as the deity within emptiness, yet appearing. Right? So there's some ways of doing that. It says also, spread far apart your feet of the 2 truths. So in the different sadhanas, sometimes there's a recognition of the various attributes of the deity as having particular significance. So the 2 feet of Yamataka represent the 2 truths. Open wide your eyes of method and wisdom. What is the relationship between method and wisdom and the 2 truths? Do you know, buddy? So when we present the tenets, usually when we study tenets, one of the ways they present it is the basis are the 2 truths. The the paths are method and wisdom, and the results are what? The 2 bodies of the Buddha, the Rupakaya, the form body, and the Dharmakaya, the wisdom body, or you could say the phenomenal body, truth body. So conventional truths, the way that we practice conventional truths are through method. The way that we understand ultimate truths or the way we understand conventional truth is through the ultimate methods. Here in the Bodhisattva path, the method that we're talking about mainly is bodhicitta, right? But in the Hinayana path, what's the main method dealing with conventional reality? What's the main? Yeah, what's the main method? Maybe renunciation. The way that maybe in one sense, in analogy to the main methodology, the supreme method of the Bodhisattva in dealing with all of the appearances is always try to utilize them through a mind of bodhicitta. Maybe. You can think about that. And the way that we deal with ultimate reality is the wisdom, with ultimate truth. The way that we understand it is via the wisdom. When we talk about method and wisdom, it's talking about the wisdom that understands emptiness, not just wisdom of conventional truths. And the consequence of that, by accumulating merit, and then we talk about the accumulation. Through that, we accumulate the 2 collections, the collection of merit and the collection of wisdom. The collection of merit comes about through the practice of recognizing conventional reality, and out of bodhicitta, guru devotion, and so forth, creating karma that is the cause for the Rupakaya, the form body, and the Sambhogakaya, the enjoyment body. Out of the ultimate truth, understood by wisdom, we create the collection of wisdom, and that gives rise to the Dharmakaya, and eventually what's called the nature body, the Svavavikakaya. So the 2 eyes are kind of like counterpart of the 2 legs, right? They're what see the 2 truths. that or practice or understand them. Open wide your eyes of method and wisdom. Which eye would be method? Just like
Right up.
maybe the right eye, left eye would be wisdom. Bear your fangs of the four powers. What are the four powers?
Recognition, regret, resolve, and doing something about it. I can't think of an R word.
Doing something about it. That's a nice power. Power of doing something about it.
Is it like pacification, increasing power and wrath? Is it like those four powers?
Here, the commentaries say it's the four opponent forces, the four powerful forces. So, regret, resolving not to do again. Power of reliance, which means what? Relying upon Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha with negative karma that you created with respect to them. Relying on sentient beings for the negative karma you created with respect to them. So, refuge and bodhicitta. And the power of what?
Remedy?
Antidote or remedy, which means like for instance, when you do Vajrasattva meditation, that meditation of Vajrasattva is actually the meditation on the remedy, reciting the mantra and so forth. You need also the other opponent forces in the sadhana. You need to spend some time regretting the negative karma you created, resolving, especially at the end, now I won't do this again, the opponent force comes. And refuge and bodhicitta comes in the motivation. So you have, if you practice the sadhana that way, then you'll have all four opponent forces. So next Monday we're going to take a break, and this coming Thursday there's a break. So the next class will be the low-grade class next week, not this week, next Thursday. So you have time to go over and maybe review what we've done, read a little bit ahead. How are you feeling? You okay? I think I scared the questions out of you by saying, okay. So let's dedicate this first segment of our course, the energy that we created during here. So this, first of all, the dedication is dealing with conventional reality, right? It's recognizing its methodology, it's an aspiration, it's a kind of prayer that's trying to link up the karma that we've created, the karmic seeds, the potency of the actions we've created tonight and in the past. Even the karma that we will create in the future, we can dedicate now. Due to these merits, may I quickly attain enlightenment for the welfare of all sentient beings. One kind of dedication. Or due to these merits, may the doctrine spread, this incredible nectar of the Dharma, which I can see has helped me so much. May it spread to where it's never spread before, in the places and minds of sentient beings. May it revive where it's degenerated and increase. Or due to these merits, may the holy beings that teach paths to liberation and enlightenment have long lives, and may their Dharma wishes be effortlessly fulfilled, their wishes that bring benefit to sentient beings due to these merits. Three great dedications, sometimes said. And when you have a strong feeling about those, to seal those within the three spheres of emptiness, the karmic seeds that we're dedicating are empty of true existence. They don't inherently exist. They're merely labeled. They can't be found from their own side. And the goal that we're dedicating to, whether it be our own enlightenment for the welfare of sentient beings, the alleviation of suffering, the long life of the gurus and their actions being effortlessly fulfilled, or the spreading of the Dharma and so forth, none of those inherently exist. They're just concepts that our mind labels to a basis But they can function. Those events can come about. Those conventional phenomena can come about due to the potency of this karma, due to our, especially quickened due to our dedication, due to this merit. May that happen. Even the action of dedication. The agent, myself, I don't truly exist. The thought processes within my mind stream, they can't be found inherently. Linking up the seeds with their karmic results. So try to meditate on the emptiness of the three spheres of the dedication also, to seal that